Within 2 hours of Lincoln's calling, Lynn troops were lining the streets and marching off to Civil War. Among them were 2 Medal of Honor recipients, members of the 54th Regiment, and servicemen who happened to have been present at 2 separate presidential assassinations and attempts. Their stories, and many more like them, can be found here at the Grand Army of the Republic Hall and Museum in Lynn, Massachusetts. Mollis and Dulles, welcome to GAR Lynn. Believed to be the last freestanding structure of its kind in the region, still serving its intended purpose, and once the largest GAR post in the nation, the General Frederick W. Lander Post No. 5 was erected in 1885 as a memorial to Union Army and Navy veterans of the Civil War. Nice capstan, isn't it? Behind me you'll see a depiction of the USS Kearsarge and this familiar item, but I'll let Larry tell you a little bit more about that.
It's June of 1864. The Civil War on the seas are being controlled by a raider called the Alabama. It's a Confederate ship, and she's terrorizing the whole Atlantic. And what she's doing is she's making it so that other ships, Union ships, are afraid to go out onto the waters. Every ship in the Union Navy is looking for the ship, and the Kearsarge, which is about her equal, ends up being over in the English Channel, and she finds out that the Alabama has gone into Cherbourg, France for repairs. Now, a ship can only go into a friendly country and for 72 hours for repairs, and she has to leave. If she doesn't leave, she has to be interned for the rest of the war. So the Kearsarge goes into the harbor, and Captain Winslow of the Kearsarge talks to Captain Semmes of the Alabama, and he insults him more or less. And he wants to bring the Alabama out of the harbor for a battle. Raphael Semmes, the captain of the Alabama, is so mad for the things he said. The Alabama the next day comes out, and she meets the Kearsarge 7 miles off the coast of France, and it becomes a 90-minute battle. Now, one of the first shots goes right into the rudder of the Kearsarge. It's a 100-pound shell that goes through the rudder, and it stops there and doesn't explode, and it stays in the rudder. Now, the rudder steers the ship. So the helmsman, who's from Groveland, a guy named Poole, he has to get 2 men to help him steer the ship for the rest of the battle. That shell is now in the Smithsonian in Washington, and it's such a famous battle. Finally, the Alabama sinks. And they say 22 men die on it. Nobody dies on the Kearsarge. There's pictures of it. Now these are pictures that are drawn right after the battle. They were drawn by a French artist. Photography in those days, they had to wait for 2 or 3 minutes in order to get a picture, so you couldn't get any action pictures, so they have to be all like this. But this is right after the battle. And if you look, on the right-hand side is the Alabama. On the left is the Kearsarge, and that's the battle while it's being fought. That's an actual picture by the artist, that he was right there. The deck of the Kearsarge with an 11-inch cannon, which did so much damage. And if you look to the lower right on the picture, you'll see this capstan. And the capstan is the same one that's right in front of us here. And the capstan is simply on the decks of ships. You would start the anchor at the bottom, and we would have holes in the sides of the capstan, and you'd put poles in there, and the men would walk around with the poles. This would turn like this, and the anchor would be winding around it. Now that's, in that picture, is the capstan of the Kearsarge. So this is actually it.
Thank you, Larry. And that is how this capstan came to take its place in our Grand Hall. Now, something similar happened to Lincoln's boots from the night of his assassination, but I will save that one for our next video. Let's relocate. I'll tell you a little bit more about this treasure chest, and most importantly, why we were brought on at this pivotal moment to assure its survival. As human beings, we are charged with preserving our nation's history for future generations. As the Friends of GAR Lynn, we are charged with saving this museum and its collections from imminent collapse and destruction imposed by decades of neglect and deferred maintenance. And of course, we know that just saving this museum is not enough. We cannot bear to lose this. one of the rarest of flags and symbolic articles of freedom.
In 1887, it was like 20 years after the Civil War, the woman of the Robert E. Lee post, which was the biggest Confederate post in the country, came up here to talk to the woman of the biggest Yankee post in the country. And they wanted to try to reconcile a little bit. And what they did is they brought them down to Richmond, and they had an outing. And this is the picture of the outing they had in 1887. And what they did is they gave this flag to the guys of this post, or the people of this post. And this flag here was the last flag to fly over Richmond in the Civil War, you know, which is enormous. And they brought this back with them. Then they reciprocated by having all the same Confederates up here, and they had a big outing in the Hunt. They were trying to make it a little bit better. But as you can see, there's 13 stars, which there was only 11 states, but they always add Kentucky and Missouri, because they had a small amount of Confederate people there in government. So they always make it 13 stars, but there's only 11. But all the flags are red, white, and blue because they're all American.
Our first charge will be to modernize the building to comply with the ADA requirements for accessibility. Not doing so harms the museum in more ways than one. Not only are we losing visitorship, but being non-ADA compliant makes us ineligible to apply for certain government and private funding and assistance. Quite literally, people cannot see the building and its contents because of its lack of accessibility. And oh, the things they'd learn if they could just come inside.
When I first stepped into this grand building, I was humbled and awed by the level of commitment from the community to preserve the memory of the men who sacrificed themselves in one of the most important conflicts in human history. Not just the struggle to bring freedom to 4 million African American enslaved people, but to the duty everyone in this place believed was their sacred task. Keeping together a union that ensured its people the opportunity to rise above their circumstances to find prosperity and security. Our Civil War and its outcome shaped the future of the entire world. This museum tells that story, with a collection that honors the men who fought that war and the heroic deeds they performed. Come inside, as I first did, and see this incredible place, keeping in mind that we need to bring it forward through the next 150 years as a 21st century museum and research center that engages visitors in its story by capturing and preserving its unique historic integrity for generations to come.
We see the vision of making this a 21st century museum, able to serve the region for the next 150 years, and not by changing every detail from top to bottom, but by capturing and preserving its historic integrity for generations to come. This here is the building's original library. Notice the insignia inscription at the top of the bookcase. Just another example of incredible craftsmanship specific to the GAR within these walls. The Sons of Union veterans were famous for many things, but their Frank and Bean suppers were legendary and integral in the filling of these shelves. Price of admission? 1 book. We must modernize the air handling system so that all of this effort and treasure is not wasted, and we don't return this restored collection to the same conditions that damaged it. A controlled climate will assist in keeping these precious relics from dry rotting or moldering away, and allow us to welcome visitors on a year-round basis, no matter the outside conditions. We'll seek to implement contemporary interactive exhibits. This will include the installation of accessible display cabinets equipped with proper internal lighting and signage. For example, monitors to provide more information on the exhibits than can fit on a placard. This will give more visibility to each item, making it easier for the viewer to appreciate its purpose. This is a very basic descriptive overview, but I want you to rest assured that everyone will continue to have the experience of walking back in time to 1886 when they come through these doors. Nothing about the building or its artifacts will change, only the engagement of our visitors and how they experience our displays. We'll create a sustainable model that funds the varied needs of this museum. These are not the needs fed by the duty of the city to maintain said building. The needs of the building far exceed that mandate. This model needs to fund the ongoing work of creating innovative programming, meaningful outreach, and consistent care and restoration of its holdings. There will be a plan in place for a revenue stream for the hall and museum. Let us explore some possibilities together. Instead of 2 tenant spaces, there is ample opportunity to support a sustainable revenue-generating model, including the creation of a multi-use function room for rental. Or, our intrepid architect has put forth the idea of being able to offer a virtual tour of the hall, utilizing the reclaimed space on the ground floor where the tenants currently occupy. Also included would be new restrooms and a kitchen, of course to be constructed to meet all code requirements. The trustees will have an opening to ensure that funds raised by this space stay in the hall where they belong. According to our often referred to Acts of 1919, the trustees shall fix and receive any rentals to be derived from the use of any part of the present building. We are offering an improved financial structure, changing the dynamic to avoid the diverting of funds away from the hall, as we've unfortunately experienced in the past. Our funding plan is a technical theory at this point in time, but we do know we will be hiring a professional fundraiser, and as a nonprofit working for a building that is on the National Register of Historic Places, as well as Preservation Massachusetts' most endangered historic resources list, we are eligible to apply for various grants that are geared toward the restoration of historic places. We have commissioned the construction of an impeccable website that will tell our story, as well as that of the GAR, and reach people on a national level, providing them the opportunity to donate to our cause. We intend to host high-level capital fund drives and undertakings, and we will pursue specific and strategic targeted marketing initiatives. Most effectively, as a group of impassioned, enlightened, and invigorated individuals, we are ready to seize this moment in time and set this memorial and its contents on the right path. Our audience is diverse. The museum's primary, secondary, and tertiary visitorship will come from veterans and servicemen and women, their families, ancestors of those who served, diverse populations of schools and students, Civil War tour groups, history buffs, tourists traveling between Boston and Salem and other North Shore areas, prideful locals, museum goers. No one is an exception here. With this presentation, you'll receive estimates, stories, and history lessons. We could speak passionately about our mission to preserve this vital piece of history until we are Union blue in the face. But, as you've hopefully learned today, our organization's principal objectives are strikingly similar when it comes to striving to perpetuate the memory of those who fought to preserve the unity and indivisibility of the Republic. And we know that many original companions of Mollis were also members of the Grand Army of the Republic. Similarly, many hereditary companions of Mollis are currently also members of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. In this war between the states, men fought for nothing less than whether to preserve the United States of America. With our groups united, we can fight to preserve this endangered memorial for those who fought to create it.
You can see what a critical moment in time that we have been presented with, to act expeditiously to preserve this national treasure and its collections and resources. I know that your financial commitment to this work will help bring it to fruition. Your support at this time will be the basis for initial assessments conducted by recommended specialists in the field of building and archive preservation. All fundraising efforts going forward will depend on having these assessments done. Many people thank veterans for their service, who assure them that their sacrifices will not be forgotten. How can we uphold this promise, that their generation's sacrifices will be remembered? We can do this thanks to the many people here who are willing to devote themselves to preserving the memory of the men who fought and died so many generations ago. Thank you for your pledge to assist us.